Hi friends, thanks for tuning in. I will start this by saying this is a content warning. We will be discussing mental health, suicide ideation, possible drug use, and sexual assault, and body image issues. So if this is uncomfortable and you find it triggering, please step away now, and much love. And for those of you who are staying, here we go. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and I wanted to sort of share my thoughts and my feelings about mental health, just kind of put some things out there. Mental health is not just one diagnosis. It's not just one thing. It's not just bipolar. It's not just anxiety. It's not just depression. It's a combination of things a lot of the times. It's like onions. You have to kind of keep peeling back the layers. And a lot of times you also won't get an exact diagnosis as to what you have. Example, I have all these traits: borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder number 2, anxiety, depression, bulimia, OCD, rejection syndrome, validation issues. Like, it just kind of keeps going. And, drug dependency. And when I had talked with a psychiatrist years ago, I had asked her, I said, what's wrong with me? What do I have? I want to know. And she said, I can't give you an exact diagnosis other than you have a mood disorder. Not what I wanted to hear whatsoever. So, and what had actually jump-started that visit was a trip to the hospital for suicide ideation. The years leading up to that had been really rough for me for a number of reasons, which I won't go into, but let's just say probably not doing the behaviors I should be, relying on substances to get through the day, and just not being satisfied with myself and actually hating myself more often than not. So suicide. I can't claim to know what it's like to visit the hospital for actually doing something to yourself physically to try and leave this world. I can't attest to that. What I can attest to is where my thought process was when I visited the hospital, June 19th. So leading up to this day, lots of mistakes, lots of issues. I'd lost 7 jobs in a row, not all because of my fault. I was losing my apartment. It was just too many things all at once. And there was a day I made a major mistake at a current job and I was let go. And after all this time, it just was the final straw. And I lost it. I had felt like I was a burden to everybody around me, that I was only dragging people down, that no matter what I did, it would only make things worse and people would have to rely on me or were not able to rely on me. And I felt extremely alone, even with the people I love around me. So ended up going to the hospital for suicide ideation, which is basically when you're not in a safe place mentally and you're worried you're going to do something to yourself. It doesn't mean you do, but when I reached that point, I was literally facing my death because of how much suffering I was having internally. So it has taken years of work. I saw a therapist beginning in high school, and I started medication end of high school, all the way through college. And it wasn't easy. There's a lot of judgment with people taking medication for mental health. Well, you don't need it. Try it this way, etc., etc. It doesn't work that way for some of us. Some of us, our mental health and our chemical imbalances do not make us able to function in a way that society deems acceptable sometimes. I go through what I call tizzies or episodes, where it's a form of disassociation, where I can feel myself inside and I see what I'm doing around me, but it's like I'm an animal backed into a corner and I don't know whether to lash out or to cry. And it's hard for the people around us to deal with that, especially if they don't understand it or haven't dealt with it before themselves. And there's also a lot of judgment about mental health and what you should be doing or what you could be doing to get better. It takes a lot of time. I'm 32 years old and I'm only just beginning to figure out my mental health and why I was bulimic for so long and why I have OCD and why I have these anxieties and why I have this bipolar 2, aside from the fact that it does run in my family. That's another thing. Genetics, they play a part. It doesn't mean you'll necessarily act upon them, but they are traits passed down to us, including chemical imbalances. A lot of the times with mental health, we force judgment upon ourselves, whether it's by listening to people around us or, our own internal dialogue. And I keep going back to chemical imbalances because that's sort of where the base point is. But our spirituality and who we are and where we come from and our soul, if that's suffering, then how are we supposed to be present in life? Mental health is a battle. It's not easy. And I often use the spoon theory. And for those of you who don't know, it's basically you start the day with X number of spoons, and every time you engage with somebody or do something, you're giving away these spoons. So at the end of the day, you have to make sure you have a spoon for yourself. And if you don't, what are you going to do? So mental health is a lot of spoons to deal with. And I guess my point to all of this is that the judgments around others with mental health is not acceptable. The judgments for those who are seeking therapy or medication is not acceptable. It is not their life. It is your life. And if you are struggling and suffering, that is not what this life is for. But I also want to whomever is listening to this, I want you to know that you are validated. You have validation for having these experiences and these emotions, whether it's brain chemistry or what has happened around you, nature versus nurture, whatever. You are valid, and you have a right to experience your emotions and to seek help and seek advice. And if you can't seek advice because you're at the end of your rope, I hope you know it does get better. It's taken a lot of work and a lot of time, and I am not a patient person. If any of you know me, I am not a patient person. Give it to me now. Let me fix it. And I've had to learn to work with my emotions between coming to terms with my bulimia, a pretty nasty sexual assault in college, which at the time I did not think was a sexual assault or rape. But again, years later, this is stuff I worked through and taken time to really understand, peeling back these layers. And I've also worked on creating mindfulness practices. Everyone kind of rolls their eyes sometimes about like, oh, here we go, mindfulness, meditation, yada, 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 holistic crystals. That's fine. Like, it might not work for everybody, but there's a group called DBT, Dialectical Behavioral Therapy. And it's all about mindfulness and working your way through these moments of suffering. And people will think of suffering like, oh, well, I'm not starving to death. I have a roof over my head. We're talking about internal emotional suffering, what your soul is feeling and experiencing. And mindfulness creates these exercises and a way to sort of reconnect certain pathways in your brain so that you can find ways to sort of ease that suffering in the moment without, for me, for example, losing herself into this episode. So there are options out there, and it takes a lot of time and effort to be able to do that, especially by yourself when you're suffering. I had a lot of help through my doctor, my therapist, my psychiatrist, as well as a social worker. And I just hope people know that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how much you hate yourself, no matter how much you're angry at yourself, it does get better. I promise. This isn't your fault. None of it is. You are you are here, you're valid, you're alive, and I'm happy you're here. Because once we start working internally on fixing our mental health and working and trying to understand it, the judgments from others tend to disappear because suddenly you're so hyper-focused on your own mental well-being that things just kind of fall away. That whole your vibe attracts your tribe, same idea. When you start becoming more of yourself, certain things and aspects and people in your life are going to fall away because you're becoming more of yourself. And that's extremely lonely at times. So after all these ramblings for 10 minutes, I just wanted to pop on here and say, you know what? Mental health is a real thing. It's okay that you are suffering. Not that we want you to suffer, but that you are valid. And there are ways to work through it and to seek help and to get help and to also receive that validation. It's not easy. It takes a hell of a lot of time, but it is possible. So thank you for taking the time to listen to this. I send my love to you all. I appreciate all of you and the support my life has received from all of you, family, friends, animals, you name it. And I'm grateful. And I thank you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts. Much love.